Thanks everyone for joining us today as we continue the Product Security Summit. My name is Prasad Raman, VP of Partnerships at SciCode, and I'll be hosting this session. One of the core takeaways of today is how modern security teams get more value by working across domains rather than in silos. Today's discussion is about how we work with our partners to connect those pieces, add meaningful context to findings, and help teams focus on vulnerabilities that actually matter in the real world. We're excited to be joined by Kyle Metivier and Adam Dudley from our technology partners HackerOne and Nucleus Security. We're looking forward to sharing some practical examples on how our customers get more value from us working together. Kyle and Adam, can you both give a brief introduction for our audience?
Sure. Thanks, Prasad. Excited to be here. Adam Dudley. I'm VP of Strategy and Alliances with Nucleus Security, based in Sarasota, Florida. I develop strategic relationships with our tech partners and been with the company for almost 6 years now and worn so many hats I can't even remember them all.
Hi, Prasad. I'm Kyle Metivier. I work with HackerOne as a staff platform product manager. I've been with HackerOne for about 6 months now and have a background across the cyber domain that would take too long to explain here.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to have both you joining us today. So let's jump into our first topic. Obviously, AI is still top of mind and will continue to be for the foreseeable future. Why don't we start with Kyle from HackerOne's perspective? How is AI changing the way offensive security findings are generated, validated, and how we trust what's coming in from those platforms?
Sure. That's a great question. And to get started, I think a lot of the time when people are talking about AI and security, we're talking about defender productivity. What's missing from that conversation is that attackers and researchers are using the exact same tooling, and they're using it offensively first. And what this means is that AI is collapsing some of these exploit timelines that we've built into policies across organizations. We're seeing attackers use LLMs to rapidly analyze code bases. They're enumerating edge cases, and most importantly, chaining together issues that individually look low severity into real production-grade exploits. And a concrete example here of what we've seen is that when we're experimenting in an environment where there were 3 separate findings, these were all triaged as low or medium. One of them, a basic insecure direct object reference, lets you read a single object. Another, an overly permissive internal API token. And the third was an endpoint that trusted internal calls a little too much. Individually, none of these look urgent. They sit in the backlog. But a researcher can chain them together and demonstrate full account takeover across tenants in under a day. Nothing new is discovered. What changes is how fast the connections are made. And that's the reality that AI introduces and why validation and context matter more than severity labels. That old mental model of we'll fix highs and criticals first breaks when 3 lows become a critical in hours now and not months. We all know that CVSS was designed for static scoring, and AI makes that exploitation dynamic. What matters more now is it reachable? Is it exploitable in your environment, and can it be chained? So severity alone stops being useful here. It's a static, and AI-driven exploitation is dynamic. And that's why prioritization without validation just doesn't work, which is where Adam and our partners at Nucleus come in.
And I can really validate, pun intended, what Kyle just said, which is what I've been hearing from security leaders, last year, now we're in 2026, but 2025, all my conversations, they universally agree that they're not so concerned with new attacks enabled by AI, but the velocity of attackers going from discovering that exposure, that vulnerability, to actual exploitation. And so other than the really sophisticated deep fakes that most of us have heard about, there aren't novel attacks emerging so far, just better equipped attackers, which is really requiring enterprises and challenging them to level up, to reduce their attackable surface by cleaning up their truly critical vulnerabilities and exposures, which systems like HackerOne help you find and validate. And so When it comes to prioritization, which is, the subtopic we're getting at here, it only works when you really, you normalize data and correlate risk across all the unique systems across your environment, the many different systems all of our customers have, which are, cloud, application security, traditional network infrastructure, and so on. And really, severity alone, as Kyle was alluding to, is meaningless without the proper context, right? You have exploitability and exposure and malware and all those types of things that have to be validated by a system like HackerOne. And then layering on that business context, right? Like, is this an exploitable vulnerability on a really critical system? And that gets you to your true criticals, as we say, which, I think the research shows is somewhere between 2 to 5%. That could be the really low hanging fruit for an attacker. And it's possible now to transition. This is why CTEM is gaining adoption. And CTEM isn't a tool. It's a framework and continuous operating loop from scope all the way through mobilization that Prasad is going to talk a little bit more about.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really helpful framework to think about how our products work together. On the AI piece as well, I mean, from Psycho's standpoint, it's radically changing our business. You look at how software is written today compared to even 3 to 5 years ago. It's it's a completely new world. And you think about how important code and internally developed applications are to business. It's the way, more than just a piece of technology, it's a way companies differentiate, how they provide better experiences to customers, how they provide more efficient operations. And as, AI is becoming more critical to application development, the attack surface for that code is growing bigger. The same developer can now push out, 10x, 20x, 100x more code than they could even a couple of years ago. And application security teams can't keep up. And one of the ways we have to respond to that is by working with partners like HackerOne. So how do we validate what the real world exploitability is for some of these findings, and how do we focus on what matters? How do we get context across more security domains for Nucleus? And for us, it's critical to approach this new world together with some of our partners to figure out how we can address the new challenges we all face.
Yeah, and I think that's where CTEM really starts to make sense. Not as a buzzword here or a framework even, but as a necessity about how we approach cybersecurity now. From HackerOne's perspective, our role in CTEM is really intentional. We're not trying to be another signal. We provide ground truth about what is dangerous in your environment. And our job here is to answer some really basic but complex questions around, is this asset actually reachable? And Adam brought a lot of these up previously around, can this vulnerability be exploited in practice? And does this chain hold up outside of theory? And we're doing that through adversarial validation, our human researchers, agentic testing, proof of exploit, and really stress testing the reality of what's out there. And what that gives Adam and the Nucleus platform is confidence. Instead of having to guess at what might matter, they're able to have a really clear signal about what they can prioritize and know what does matter. Nucleus correlating Psycode's code level context and then bringing in HackerOne's exploitability signal and then applying that business logic on top of it. And I think here that's the difference between exposure management, like as a concept, and being able to work across these types of partnerships to introduce exposure reduction as an outcome. And I think the big takeaway and why we're together is that it only works when the signals are connected. Validation without prioritization is just going to create noise. Prioritization without validation creates false confidence. And neither of that matters if you can't mobilize the remediation of that. And that's where validation from HackerOne helps that next phase of CTEM, prioritization, which Adam has mentioned and is going to go into a little bit more.
Yeah, and our mutual customers love the high signal validated vuln data that we get from HackerOne and Psycode. It really fuels our platform because we don't generate any data ourselves. We're simply a consolidation layer. And it's really data like this that allows Nucleus to be sort of the central nervous system at the business level for our customers' exposure assessment and management programs. And so we're consolidating signals from all your critical systems, including Cycode and HackerOne, to score risk in a custom way if you choose. As Kyle mentioned, layer on that asset and business context and threat intelligence, automatically route critical exposures at the business level faster at scale. Just a quick customer story, because I think we have time, about a tier 1 global airline who was able to cut their vulnerabilities by 86% in 6 months with Nucleus. They were facing a whole huge set of fragmented tools, poor asset visibility, no way to prove risk reduction. And they chose to make Nucleus their system of record, which unifies data from 160 different tools, automates workflows with things like Jira and ServiceNow, drives that accountability, which everybody wants at scale. And really, this approach mirrors what we're talking about with CTEM, continuously prioritizing, validating, and mobilizing remediation based on what actually matters. And we can't do this without our partners like HackerOne and Cycode, because you all are providing those validated signals and offering deeper level mobilization, when it comes to application security. So this airline amazingly uses Nucleus across 1,800 different users, IT and engineering, security, and they rely on Nucleus to zero in on those fixes at the business level that need to happen to really protect their organization. And so, when it comes to things specialized like product security, when you absolutely need to know precisely who broke the code and where it lives so you can fix it rapidly, that is what Cycode is known for being world-class at. And let Prasad speak to that a little more.
Exactly, and that's why I think we all work so closely together. And we view Cycode's role as, how do we connect the last mile? When HackerOne gives you information on this is exploitable, Nucleus helps talk about the criticality. We also have world-class scanners that are detecting some of those application vulnerabilities. But Cycode's strength is, how do we tie that back to your code base? So who broke it, where in the code it lives, and more importantly, how do we bring in development teams to mobilize and actually fix these exploits? It's one thing to find something to say it's important. We can do all the validation we want, but if we can't actually work with development teams to address those issues, the business impact and the security risk reduction we're not able to achieve. So yeah, that's something we really take pride in, and something that we rely on additional context from our partners to help us do more effectively. But I think that really tells the story of how all of us work together. I guess we have want to pivot a little bit to a different topic for the discussion around business impact, and I think this is where all of us, it's easy in cybersecurity to talk about risk reduction, how we can solve CVEs, how we can work through lists of vulnerabilities, but I'd love to talk a little bit about how each of our products and us collectively drive value to businesses that we work with. And maybe Kyle, we'll start with you and talk a little bit about how some of the work HackerOne does and some of the business outcomes you drive for your customers.
Sure. So within the context of business outcomes from HackerOne, what we're able to do is, within how a customer understands the assets in their computing environment, and be able to use our background of crowdsourced research as well as our agentic offensive testing to look into those assets and define what's actually risky. And then of that, have processes that define of these reports which are validated, and then be able to make sure that they are in fact exploitable. So what that means is, we're finding the edge cases that scanners aren't able to find. We're able to discover these chainable exploits and point out where severity and internal policies might not line up to what's actually risky in that asset environment. And what that means for a customer from a business perspective is that they're less likely to experience an adversarial event because of these, and they're catching them earlier and faster because of where HackerOne is able to look into that.
Yeah. I guess, Adam, from Nucleus' standpoint, I think you had the anecdote about the global airline, but in terms of broader business outcomes that Nucleus, looks to achieve, what are some other proof points or objectives you generally have?
Yeah, of course. Well, I'd like to highlight the scalability component because that's really something we're known for in the space. We're working with the world's largest enterprises that are ingesting, not only the systems data that we're talking about here today, which is Cycode and HackerOne, but upwards of 160 to 200 different tools across all the different domains of vulnerability and exposure management. And so that is a significant big data operation to day after day. I think we're up to 10 billion vulnerability and exposures per day that we're ingesting into our system. And we have to, normalize all that, correlate it. We have to extract things like getting a little technical now, but extracting metadata that customers might want to use in their various workflows in Nucleus that they use to run their vulnerability operations. So, if there's unique data in Cycode or HackerOne, it could be as simple as, exploitability, or it could be very specific, like, users or teams that own those particular assets or those vulnerabilities. We have to do a good job extracting and transforming that data as we ingest it from our third-party systems, and then making it available in Nucleus in a convenient way to run reports, develop dashboards, create automations, that type of thing. And so when it comes to really the data needed to do exposure management at a very, very large scale, that's where Nucleus comes in. And what we find is that competitors in our niche of the world, they tend to fall over when you get upwards into the tens of millions or hundreds of millions of vulnerabilities in some cases. So that's really our thing, is scalability.
Yeah. And for us at Cycode, it's similar. It's all about, mainly about speed. And so how do we mobilize companies to find vulnerabilities quickly, ingest context from third parties to focus on what matters, and be able to address those. And for us, it's about making sure development velocity can continue, and we can maintain a level of security for a lower total cost of ownership. That's something that we focus on for our customers to make sure their businesses can continue to operate at the speed they need, and kind of take advantage of some of the benefits that we have.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but there's huge value there because, the development organization's trying to ship secure software as fast as possible. And we know security can sometimes be the obstacle in the way or the friction point. And so I see, massive value of how Cycode allows you to reduce and remove that friction so that software can go out faster and create more business value, right?
Absolutely. And that's how we all work together in that. I mean, if we can't validate what matters, it's less efficient. If we can't prioritize what matters, it's less efficient. And if we can't easily integrate with development teams and work with them, the entire process becomes less efficient. So, that's a real better together story here about how we work together to implement best practices at companies. But that does, we're approaching the end of the session here. It's clear from the discussion that context is the missing link. And, without it, we're just drowning in noise. And connecting the dots between code, offensive findings, and exposure management is how all of us stay ahead of the volume we're seeing today. For those listening, I'd encourage you to talk with either Cycode, Nucleus, or HackerOne to learn more about how our products work together and how we give application security teams complete context on security findings. Adam and Kyle, want to thank you both for joining us and really appreciate your insights in this discussion. For those of you watching, there's plenty more to come. I'm going to pass the stage back to Monica to walk us through our next segment.
Thank you.
Thank you.